Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission happening here on Florida's Space Coast. I'm Will Robinson-Smith. I'll be providing the commentary for the duration of the coverage tonight. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Tonight, I'm joined by Stephen Young, who's standing in for Adam Bernstein to operate the cameras tonight, also helping to run the graphics, make sure things run technically smooth here for our broadcast. You're taking a look in the center of your screen at Historic Launch Complex 39A, where tonight's mission will hopefully take place, as the Falcon Heavy has been patiently waiting to launch since its original date this week was targeting Wednesday. Of course, SpaceX got down to T-minus 1 minute, 5 seconds, and they had to call a hold and waved off their opportunity to launch that night. They were continuing to do some work yesterday and earlier today, and now they are in a position where they feel like they can launch tonight. Right now we are tracking a T0 of 11:04 p.m., the beginning of the launch window, which lasts for 99 minutes. That's 03:04 UTC on July 30th or July 29th, excuse me. Payload on board tonight's mission is the Jupiter 3 satellite, also known as EchoStar 24. It is the heaviest communication satellite waiting to be launched, sitting on top of the Falcon Heavy rocket inside those payload fairings. Thank you to all of you who are joining us on the early end of our coverage, as we are now T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes and counting to hopefully the liftoff of this Falcon Heavy rocket. If you'd like to support our coverage of the space program, we'd love it if you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can get notifications for when new videos are posted. And of course, so you don't miss any of our live streams. And also, we'd love it if you could share the stream. It helps people find this live coverage as well as the other things happening with our channel. And naturally, we can't do these launch broadcasts without the support of all you viewers at home, especially our members. So thank you to everyone who has made a contribution helping to fund our coverage. Speaking of, want to give a thank you to Carlos Moore IR for the super chat comment. Always thanks for the transmission, guys. Regards from Chile. Oh, thanks for watching down in there in Chile. Hope the weather's doing fine down there. Jeff Vanderberg became a Pad Leader member. Thank you so much for joining the membership at that level. Really appreciate it. It is our members and subscribers who help make this channel happen, help us do more in our coverage of the space program. And so if you'd like to help as well in that endeavor, beyond engaging in the stream today, if you could consider making a donation through the YouTube Super Chat feature, as we've had a few already tonight, that would be wonderful. And of course, membership also grants you access to our special members-only videos as well as discounts for our online shop. T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes, about 47 seconds and counting. At this point, we're about 20 or so minutes away from the point at which the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. SpaceX is running the countdown from their site near where it does its refurbishing work for the Falcon boosters, called Hangar X on Roberts Road here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. This will be the first Falcon Heavy launch that's controlled from this site. They've been working on launch operations from Hangar X with a few previous Starlink missions, going through all the work towards being able to do a crew launch from that site as well. That being the Crew 7 mission coming up no earlier than August 17th. It was delayed from August 15th, but because the Falcon Heavy has slid to the right, first from Monday to Wednesday, and now from Wednesday to hopefully tonight. We are waiting to see if there are any additional updates from NASA on any further changes to the Crew 7 launch. Bit of a unique mission, though. All 4 crew members flying 4 different nation flags, representing 4 different agencies from around the world. NASA, the European Space Agency, JAXA, Japan Space Agency, and Roscosmos, Russia Space Agency. If it does launch the morning of August 17th, it will lift off at 6:56 a.m. Eastern Time. So it should be a pretty spectacular sunrise launch. And of course, we'll bring you all the live coverage on that whenever it happens. We've got some cool things lined up for our coverage on that. So be sure to keep an eye on this YouTube channel, as we'll have more in the coming weeks. And speaking of NASA, they're also busy preparing for the next cargo and science mission launching to the International Space Station. That coming up not from Florida, but up in Virginia from their Wallops site. The last of the current configuration of the Antares rocket is preparing to launch. And that's coming up later on next week. So hopefully all goes well with that mission. Weather looking pretty good for tonight, as it is a calm night here on Florida's Space Coast. Haven't had the tropical wave off the coast that we had a little bit earlier this week that caused some of the disturbance. Of course, SpaceX was able to launch their Falcon 9 rocket early this morning, 12:01 a.m. Eastern, 04:01 UTC. And that was a beautiful launch, and we thank all of you who were joining us last night for that mission. Unfortunately, it wasn't the double header that we were hoping for, but technically, this will be a double launch day for SpaceX if they are able to launch this Falcon Heavy tonight. The 45th Weather Squadron issued a favorable weather prediction for tonight's window at about 65% go weather. We just have some thin clouds overhead, so hopefully that will not be an issue for SpaceX as they continue to progress towards a T0 at 11:04 p.m. Eastern tonight. So we are T-minus 1 hour, 8 minutes, and counting. Should note that on the off chance that SpaceX is not able to launch tonight, they do have a backup opportunity available on Saturday, July 29th. Same window, 99 minutes, starting at 11:04 p.m. Eastern, 03:04 UTC. Wash, rinse, repeat of the past launch attempts they've had this week. It is now 10 o'clock here on the East Coast. T-minus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. I want to talk a little bit about the stats tonight, assuming that the launch goes forward. Give an idea of where we will be in place here. If all goes well, tonight will be the 51st Falcon 9/Falcon Heavy launch for SpaceX in this year, 2023. Overall, this will be the 7th Falcon Heavy launch to date, and potentially the 3rd out of as many as 5 on deck this year. Have a little bit more on that later. With the side boosters of the Falcon Heavy landing back at landing zones 1 and 2 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, that will mark 13 total landings of Falcon Heavy boosters. It'll bring that number up to 212 booster landings for SpaceX overall to date. And this will mark the 250th launch for SpaceX. Shifting gears a little bit, talking about the payload on board. Tonight's mission is the Jupiter 3 mission for Hughes, company owned by EchoStar. The satellite you see there on your screen is also known as EchoStar 24. Right now you're taking a look at the 9.2-ton satellite in its launch configuration. Obviously laying on its side here in the image. Be vertically positioned inside the payload fairings at the top of the Falcon Heavy. You see the live pictures there on the right-hand side of your screen. In its stowed length, it's about 26 feet long. Fully deployed, though, reaches about 127 feet. Taking a look at that right here. With its solar panels fully extended. As EchoStar describes it, this is longer than a blue whale, the largest animal on the planet. So this is not only a exceedingly heavy satellite, but also a pretty large one too. Being that it's over 9 metric tons, it will be the largest commercial communications satellite ever launched. T-minus 1 hour and counting. I want to turn to our YouTube chat. Give a special appreciation to Brendan Dedekind. Apologies if I mispronounced your last name there, Brendan, but appreciate the super chat donation saying, let's go for launch. Here we go. I certainly agree. We are already here for the launch tonight, and hopefully things continue to go smoothly with the count. And we get a liftoff at T0 at 11:04. Ian James also making a super chat contribution. Really appreciate that, Ian. Thank you so much for that. Saying thank you, Spaceflight Now, and to our mods, and I could not agree more. We really appreciate our moderators like Stephanie B for making sure that there's good, constructive conversation. We love all the engagement there in the chat, but want to make sure we are being respectful to everyone and their opinions. T-minus 58 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Turning back to the mission at hand tonight, wanted to bring you a little bit more about Jupiter 3 and who it will be serving once it's on orbit. So we had a chance to speak with a member of the EchoStar team earlier this week. Here's part of our conversation.
Jupiter 3 is designed for broadband services. First and foremost, it will enhance our capabilities in our HughesNet satellite internet service, enabling us to bring more capacity and even higher speeds to satellite internet customers in rural parts of the United States, and additional capacity for rural customers in markets across Latin America. Additionally, Jupiter 3 is going to be great for cellular backhaul for mobile network operators, helping them extend reach to more people beyond where their terrestrial towers, their terrestrial connected towers can reach. And then it's also going to be used for aeronautical connectivity, for Wi-Fi in the sky, for airplanes traveling across North and South America. They'll be able to have higher speeds in flight. A geostationary satellite it's proven, it's time-tested, and they're great at laying down dense broadband capacity right where customers need it the most. And so Jupiter 3 was designed to do exactly that. It was custom designed to lay down the most capacity possible where we know our customers really need it.
And the Jupiter 3 satellite also features 300 spot beams to target coverage and has 500 gigabits per second of capacity. It's expected to begin its service in the fall of this year. T-minus 56 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 55 minutes and counting. Things still proceeding well with the countdown so far. We're now just about 2 minutes away from the SpaceX launch director giving the go for propellant load. Coming up at T-minus 53 minutes. Following that, because we've got 3 cores on this Falcon Heavy rocket, things are a little bit staggered as compared to a Falcon 9 launch, where fuel loading would begin at about T-minus 35 minutes with both the rocket-grade kerosene RP-1 as well as the liquid oxygen LOX starting at the same time. For the Falcon Heavy, they'll start the RP-1 loading at T-minus 50 minutes, and then 5 minutes later, the loading of the LOX on the first stage will begin. Really appreciate the more than 5,000 of you that are joining us tonight for our coverage. Thanks to folks like Mac McCormick III, who became a pad leader level member. Really appreciate that. Membership helps drive and improve our coverage, and of course, members get access to the member-only videos available on our YouTube channel. We've got some great stuff coming up for the rest of the year, so really appreciate you joining us and helping to improve our coverage of the space program and its robust and seemingly ever-expanding operations, not only here in Florida, but throughout the world. Now under 53 minutes left in the count, approaching T-minus 52.
Polling is complete. Team has polled go for propellant load and launch. Stand by for abort instruction.
And there we have the go for propellant load. So coming right about
For
on time.
non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD, and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence and proceed into launch abort. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count.
Falcon Heavy tanks are venting for the start of propellant load.
T-minus 50 minutes, just about 30 seconds. In about 30 seconds, we should hear the call for the start of RP-1 rocket grade kerosene loading begin. So we'll pause for that in just a second here. Following that good call out, we'll go ahead and talk about the rest of the count for tonight's mission of the Falcon Heavy rocket and its payload, the Jupiter 3 satellite.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And we heard the call for the start of RP-1 loading. So let's go ahead now at T-minus 49 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Talk about the rest of the timeline for tonight's mission. Milestone we just passed at T-minus 50 minutes. So next up in less than 5 minutes will be the beginning of LOX loading on the boosters. Those 3 boosters at the bottom of the rocket, and we'll have a little bit more about the Falcon Heavy as a launch vehicle later on. Moving right along, T-minus 35 minutes. That's when RP loading will begin on the second stage of the rocket there. Followed up at T-minus 18 minutes, 30 seconds. Second stage LOX loading will begin. At T-minus 7 minutes, the engine chill will begin. The process where a small amount of liquid oxygen will flow through the plumbing and the turbo pumps. There are 27 Merlin engines at the bottom of the Falcon Heavy rocket, and it will help protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds, the Strongback retract will begin. To take a look at the live picture of the Falcon Heavy rocket, that is the structure that is just in front of us from the perspective that our camera is pointing at the pad there, also known as the transporter erector. At T-minus 59 seconds, the flight computer will begin the final pre-launch checks. Less than 15 seconds later, at T-minus 45 seconds, the launch director will verify the go for launch. At T-minus 20 seconds, the propellant tank pressurization will begin. At T-minus 6 seconds, the engine ignition sequence will start. And if all goes well and a hold is not called, T-minus 0, which SpaceX is currently tracking for 11:04 p.m. Eastern, Falcon Heavy will lift off. T-minus 46 seconds, 46 minutes and counting. We are just about a minute away from the start of LOX loading onto the boosters of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Should hear that call out in just over 30 seconds from now.
LOX load has started.
Here we have the call for the start of LOX loading on the 3 boosters for the Falcon Heavy rocket. Things proceeding nominally so far in the count as we are less than 45 minutes to the planned T0 time. As the LOX loading begins, you can see at the bottom of your screen some of those vapors start to form at the base of the Falcon Heavy rocket. T-minus 43 minutes and counting. We're now less than 10 minutes, about 8.5 or so from the start of RP1 loading on the second stage of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Things continue to proceed well. And as we look ahead to launch in hopefully 43 minutes and some change, let's talk about where this bird is going to be flying. Falcon 9 rocket sitting at Historic Launch Complex 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, located on Florida's Space Coast. It's part of the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge. Once it does leave the pad, it will head in an easterly direction out into the Atlantic. Now, unlike Falcon 9 launches, there is no drone ship waiting for a booster recovery for this particular mission. And that's because the two side boosters will do a flip maneuver and return back to land for a land landing at SpaceX's landing sites. Those are landing zone 1 and 2 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Those boosters will land about 7.5 minutes after liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket. The core booster will continue on. It will then separate from the upper stage of the rocket. The payload fairings will deploy, and those will be recovered by one of the recovery vessels that SpaceX owns, Doug. Its other vessel, Bob, was used for this morning's Falcon 9 launch of the Starlink 6-7 mission. So those payload fairings are en route back to Port Canaveral, as will be the payload fairings used on this mission following the launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Both of those bearing the names of former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, whose place in space history will be remembered as the first folks who flew on SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station. Just about T-minus 40 minutes and counting. And as the LOX loading continues, you can see some of the vapor start to form, floating away from the Falcon Heavy rocket, hitting the moist Florida air. And apologies to those who are not a fan of that M word. I realize that there are many of y'all out there, and so this quick and apt description, but I know it is like nails on a chalkboard for some people. I want to say a quick thank you to the more than 7,500 who have joined us for our live coverage, as we are less than 40 minutes away from the hopeful liftoff of this Falcon Heavy rocket. Appreciate those, especially like Josh King, who gave a $20 super chat donation. Really want to say thank you, Josh. It is folks like yourselves and others who contribute to this channel that help our coverage of the space program happen. So thank you so much for your engagement, your contribution, and hopefully we will all get a launch to go along with it. I'm getting some great views here of just below the tip of the payload fairings here on the Falcon Heavy rocket. You see at the bottom of your screen that silver part. Well, it just slipped out of you. But that is actually, yeah, if we can tilt down just a little bit there. Right. Boop-a-doop-a-doop. Yeah, perfect. Gotcha. That is a special coating, as this mission will have a very long coast period before the satellite deployment. Helps the kerosene from freezing as it is getting ready to deploy the Jupiter 3 satellite. That doesn't come until 3 hours, 28 minutes, 39 seconds after liftoff. So it's one of the ways that SpaceX helps their customers make sure that the satellites get to their intended destination. I want to thank Pete Karstens for these amazing views of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Right now, you can see the top of one of the 3 first stage boosters that's supporting this mission. Just some excellent views of this rocket. As you can see at the bottom of your screen, a little bit of those vapors as fueling continues. We're just about now less than 2 minutes away from the start of RP1 loading on that second stage. It is now 10:30 on the East Coast here, T-minus 33 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. We were expecting to hear the call-off for the start of RP1 loading on the second stage. That may happen as I'm speaking, so if it does, I'll pause for a second. I want to thank the more than 8,700 of you that have now joined us in our live coverage. Appreciate you all for being here. If you could hit the like button and share the stream, that would be most appreciated. Helps even more people find our coverage. Thank you to a couple additional folks who have made super chat contributions. Thank you so much to Michael Sharp, as well as... Had it, lost it. There it is. Steve Martin, which, being that it's a common name, I don't imagine it is the Steve Martin that we're all thinking of from film and television. And if you're a fan of Disney lore, he had a brief stint in the magic shop on Disney's Main Street USA in California. But Steve, appreciate you being here. All the same. And thank you so much for the contribution. Genuinely mean that. Want to turn to a little bit of the history of the boosters that are being used to support this Falcon Heavy mission tonight. If you noticed in the super tight shots from Pete Karstens, you could still pretty clearly see the SpaceX logo on the boosters there. That's because they've not been around the block nearly as much as some of the others in SpaceX's fleet. Early this morning when the Falcon 9 launched at 12:01 a.m. Eastern, that was the 15th flight of that particular booster. So that was a fairly sooty one. These ones, by comparison, not nearly as much. And they've flown on the same missions, so instead of talking about them independently, we'll go ahead and talk about their collective history as we approach T-minus 31 minutes and counting. Their first venture together was supporting the National Security Mission USSF-44 back on November 1st of last year. This was the first national security mission for a Falcon Heavy rocket. Classified payload. Followed up in similar fashion in January of this year, January 15th to be specific, with the USSF-67 mission. And as we mentioned, there are a lot of other boosters with a lot of other legacy behind them, but for these two side boosters, that is it. They are making their third flight tonight. And as intended, they will return to landing zones 1 and 2 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where they will be refurbished, turned around, and we'll look at another mission down the road. Now at T-minus 30 minutes and counting. Seeing some of those great views again from Pete Karstens' camera as he pans slowly up the Falcon Heavy rocket there. As far as the progress and the count, RP-1 loading on the second stage should have begun more than 5 minutes ago. We start to see some vapors near the top of the rocket, indicating that is likely the case. T-minus 18 minutes, 30 seconds, second stage LOX loading will begin. Shortly before that, we should see what's known as the big vent. And a lot of that vapor starts to billow away from the strong back there. Taking a peek at our live chat, see that we've got more than 10,000 of you joining us tonight. That is fantastic. Appreciate you being with us on a Friday night. And want to especially thank Elvin Mitchell for his $10 super chat. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for that. As well as Paul Jenkins also making a $2 super chat donation. Really appreciate your support of our coverage of the space program. And Evan Mitchell jumping back again in the super chat with a $50 donation. Thank you so much for that, Evan. Really, really appreciate the support at that level, and for everyone that is contributing with your comments, hitting the like button, sharing the stream. having hopefully a really good conversation in the live chat. It's going a little too fast for me to keep up with all the comments there, but it looks like there's been some fun chatter about the mission and what's happening tonight. And some folks like Andrew Javer, looks like he's in the area of Orlando by Universal Studios and hoping to see the views of the Falcon Heavy once it lifts off from there. So I sincerely hope that you've got a good vantage point and are able to see this bird fly when it does, and hopefully less than 27 minutes from now. And want to say thank you to Fiona from Orlando for your $10 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Fiona. Really appreciate it. T-minus 22 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. We see the start of the big vent there as fueling continues on the Falcon Heavy rocket. They vent off from the strong back there. You can see that super cool oxygen hit the Florida air, create those vapors around the Falcon Heavy rocket. So you have a little bit of wind out there at the pad as it's floating perpendicular to the rocket there, and some great close-up shots of that vent from Pete Karsten's tracking camera there. Really appreciate the shots there, Pete. And speaking of appreciation, want to thank the more than 11,000 of you who are joining us in our live coverage right now. Want to turn to those that are making super chat contributions, because we cannot do this coverage without the support and the subscribers and the memberships here. William Motes says what we're all thinking. No scrub, please. Really hope it goes off tonight. Share your thoughts on that one. The new Space Explorer making a $5 super chat donation. Really appreciate that, new Space Explorer. Thank you for contributing to our space coverage. We have John, who became a pad leader level member. Thank you so much for joining the membership at that level, John. Andrew Stewart makes a $8 super chat contribution. Love the coverage, and well, we love that you are here with us tonight as we are now T-minus 20 minutes and counting, getting close to the start of LOX loading on the second stage of the Falcon Heavy rocket in less than a minute and a half.
Stage 2, RP1 load is complete.
And we hear the call out of Stage 2 RP1 loading. So even though we did not hear the call out for the start of that loading, we did hear the call of it concluding. So things continuing to move well here at Historic Launch Complex 39A as the Falcon Heavy gets closer and closer to its T0 at 11:04 p.m. I want to thank Ricky for their $10 super chat contribution. Same with Betty Sue Long. Thank you so much for contributing to our coverage, along with Kirk Bidwell, your $20 donation. Really appreciate that. And Fortnite Riker for your dollar contribution. And again, we appreciate everyone who is able to help monetarily donate here, but also for those of you just joining us and having a good time chatting in the live chat here, moderated by our wonderful moderators, keeping things kosher there. We enjoy bringing this coverage to you, and for all your support over the years of Spaceflight now, cannot do this without you. So we love the super chat contributions, but if that's not something that you're able to do, you know, a like on the stream helps more people find the coverage, and that is also exceedingly appreciated. So thank you for being with us tonight. Jakob gives a 5-pound contribution. Says hello from the UK. Great stream. It does have a question. Will Starship make Falcon Heavy obsolete in terms of heavy lift, or will it still be
Stage 2, LOX load has begun.
relevant? And then we hear the call out for Stage 2 LOX loading beginning. There are some missions that will continue to be contracted, I think, for the Falcon Heavy for the foreseeable future until there's a consistent cadence with SpaceX's Starship. So, little hard to say if Falcon Heavy will go the way of the dinosaurs at this point in time. But that does provide us a wonderful segue to another point that we wanted to talk about this evening as we are T-minus 17 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. This is the 7th launch of a Falcon Heavy rocket to date for SpaceX. So want to go back a little bit in time, take a peek at the past of how we got here, and what's on tap for SpaceX and its Falcon Heavy as we move forward to the rest of 2023. 2018 was a big year for SpaceX.
Ignition, liftoff.
May 11th was the first launch of the current version of its workhorse rocket, the Falcon 9 Block 5 configuration. That was the version that would go on to launch 10 astronaut flights, along with dozens of other missions. But a few months earlier,
Go Falcon Heavy!
February 6th was the introduction of SpaceX's first heavy lift rocket, aptly called the Falcon Heavy. Like the Falcon 9, the Falcon Heavy stands 70 meters or 229.6 feet tall. It features 3 Falcon 9 core stages along with 27 Merlin 1D engines. Fully fueled, SpaceX says it weighs about 1.4 million kilograms or about 3.1 million pounds and provides more than 5.1 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. It could launch about 8 tons to geostationary transfer orbit, or 26.7 tons in its fully expendable version. The demonstration flight back in 2018 catapulted founder Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster into space. It was also the first double landing of 2 Falcon first-stage boosters. Its next flight was more than a year later in April 2019 when SpaceX launched the Arabsat 6A payload. It was followed up in June for the third flight of the Falcon Heavy, with the Space Test Program, or STP-2 launch. That was a Department of Defense-led mission. The DoD was able to get this Falcon Heavy for a bit cheaper than normal, thanks to its willingness to reuse the side boosters from the Arabsat 6A mission. These first 3 missions all attempted to land the center core on a drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean, but all 3 failed. The fourth Heavy launch came years later in November 2022 with the USSF-44 mission. It became the first classified flight on a Falcon Heavy, and it was also the first time SpaceX intentionally decided to not recover its center core booster. The U.S. Space Force opted to use the 2 side boosters again on its next mission, USSF-67, on January 15, 2023. The 6th and most recent flight of the Falcon Heavy would use its full power, flying for the first time in a fully expendable configuration. It launched satellites for Viasat, Astronis, and Gravity Space. SpaceX is now preparing to launch its Falcon Heavy rocket for only the 7th time. And while SpaceX has launched the Block 5 version of the Falcon 9 rocket 187 times since the Heavy's debut, until Starship is able to start flying continuously, SpaceX will continue to rely on the Falcon Heavy for some of its most dynamic and challenging launches. That includes these next launches: EchoStar's Jupiter 3 satellite, and later in October, the deep space mission of NASA's Psyche spacecraft. T-minus 13 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, this is not the first time that SpaceX has attempted to launch this Falcon Heavy rocket. It was intending to lift off on Wednesday at the same start of the window at 11:04 p.m. Eastern. However, at T-minus 1 minute 5 seconds, a hold was called and they had to abort and wave off that launch attempt that night. The CD were learning that there was a valve that was stuck open. They were able to go in and check that, get that issue resolved. And things are proceeding well with tonight's count as they are continuing to move closer to a liftoff at 11:04 p.m. tonight. We are just about 12 and a half minutes away from that happening. And we are just about 5 minutes away from the start of the engine chill, prepping those 27 Merlin engines on the base of those 3 boosters and get them ready for launch. T-minus 10 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Weather has improved a little bit since the 45th Weather Squadron put out their launch weather forecast yesterday. SpaceX says they now have only a 25% chance of violating weather, so they are keeping an eye on that as they continue to fuel the Falcon Heavy rocket, prepare for launch at 11:04 p.m. Eastern. T-minus 9 minutes, 38 seconds and counting.
UP3 spacecraft, not internal power, go for launch.
And we heard the call out that the spacecraft is on internal power and they are proceeding toward launch. All good signs from SpaceX. Gotten some questions about the trajectory. It's been a little bit since we last spoke about it, and there are now about 18,000 of you watching, which was just a little bit more than the last time we brought up the trajectory maps, so worth bringing up one more time before we head off. SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket will lift off from historic Pad 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Once it leaves the pad, it will head in an easterly trajectory away from the launch site. After the booster engine cutoff, or BECO, those side boosters will separate, perform a flip maneuver, and they will head back to SpaceX's landing sites, those being landing zones 1 and 2 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where they will be refurbished, turned around, and prepped for another launch later on down the road. T-minus 8 minutes, 13 seconds, and counting. The center of the 3 boosters will continue on a little bit after that booster separation. That main engine will then cut off. There will be stage separation. And the second stage will begin the process after that Merlin vacuum engine ignites, and it will continue on. But let's go ahead and turn to the timeline in just a moment here. Get a little more detail about that. So we are T-minus 7 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. As we are getting that timeline ready, want to take a peek at the super chats. We are...
And stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
SpaceX finished RP1 loading there. getting ready to reach the point where it is fully fueled. The engine chill is about to begin in just about 14 seconds.
PY fuel load is complete.
What? Talk about the count after liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket, as we are T-minus 6 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. After it leaves the pad at T+1 minute 9 seconds, it will pass through the greatest point of stress on the rocket, the maximum aerodynamic pressure known as max Q. T+2 minutes 22 seconds, as I mentioned previously during the trajectory slide, that's when we'll see BECO, or the side booster main engine, cut off, followed quickly 3 seconds later
NY fuel load is complete.
as the side boosters separate. T+2 minutes 44 seconds, the side boosters boost back burn will begin. Try saying that 3 times fast. T+3 minutes 52 seconds, the first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, will happen. T+3 minutes 55 seconds, the first and second stages will separate. And then second stage engine will start shortly after that. SES at T+4 minutes and 1 second. At T+4 minutes 16 seconds, that's when the payload fairings will deploy. You see there at the center of your screen. Good timing, Pete, on that. Then a little bit after that, T+6 minutes 20 seconds, the side booster entry burn will start. T+6 minutes 36 seconds, the side booster entry burn will end.
Strong back retract in progress.
And we see the call out for the beginning of strong back retract as the clamp arms around those payload fairings open, and the strong back will tilt back just a little bit from the Falcon Heavy rocket, and it will hang out there right up until the point of liftoff, and then it will lean back significantly more and notably faster, the point at which the Falcon Heavy is ready to lift off the pad. Continuing with the count up, T+7 minutes 20 seconds, the side booster's landing burn will start. At T+7 minutes 34 seconds, the side boosters will land back at landing zones 1 and 2. T+8 minutes 23 seconds, that's when the second stage engine will cut off. SECO 1, that Merlin vacuum engine, will cut off. Then it's a little bit until the next activity, as the second stage will continue to coast until T+26 minutes 25 seconds, when the second burn will begin. SES2, that burn will last about a minute and a half until T+27 minutes 59 seconds. SECO 2, the second stage engine cutoff, takes place.
And side core LOX loads are complete.
And there you hear the call out for the loading of propellant on the side cores has wrapped up, as we are getting close to a liftoff. Less
Center
than 3
core
minutes.
LOX load is complete.
And there you go, the center core LOX load also done. Last up will be the upper stage. Continuing on with the count, there's a good bit of time after SECO 2 before the next event. Second stage Merlin vacuum engine doesn't start again until 3 hours, 22 minutes, and 1 second into the mission. It will burn for 25 seconds before SECO 3. And then finally, 6 minutes later, at 3 hours, 28 minutes and 39 seconds, the Jupiter 3 satellite will deploy. We are now 2 minutes remaining in the countdown as things continue to proceed well. Again, want to thank the...
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And there you go. The Falcon Heavy is now completely full of all its propellants, getting ready for the mission tonight to lift off in just about 1 minute and 40 seconds.
Ground gas closeouts.
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
If we hear the call out that the Falcon Heavy is in startup, just a few seconds we should hear the launch director verify go for launch. T-minus 35 seconds.
Go for launch.
And we are go for launch. Less than 30 seconds now in the countdown. Less than 20 seconds remaining. And things proceeding well. We have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket carrying the 9.2-ton Jupiter 3 satellite. Just a beautiful shot. You see those 27 Merlin engines all roaring to life as it leaps off historic pad 39A. As we are starting to hear the rumble of the Falcon Heavy reach us here at the press site. T plus 45 seconds. Falcon now supersonic at T plus 1 minute 10 seconds as it has passed through max Q. Still getting some gorgeous shots of the Falcon Heavy there. T plus 1 minute 33 seconds and counting. About a minute away from BECO, that's when the side boosters engines will cut off there. T plus 2 minutes into flight now. And you still see some gorgeous shots from Pete Karsten's tracking camera there. We should have booster separation momentarily. And T plus just about 3 minutes into the launch, you see the boosters have separated. The boost back burn has begun. Will last about 5 seconds. Just some beautiful tracking shots of this Falcon Heavy rocket now 3.5 minutes into its flight. In just about 10 seconds, the side booster's boost back burn will end. A few seconds later, we will see first stage main engine cutoff, MECO. Here's the end of the side boost back burn. MECO coming up in pretty quick order here. The SpaceX feed on a slight delay from our count. And we should see stage separation as well. And there you go, the exposure of the Merlin vacuum engine. And you see it ignite right there. The first of 3 burns of that Merlin vacuum engine, as they'll be doing a lot of work over quite a bit of time, since it'll be just about 3.5 hours into this mission before that Jupiter 3 satellite is deployed. And you see the fairings separate right there, exposing the 9.2-ton Jupiter 3 satellite for Hughes, an EchoStar company. And things are moving well for SpaceX. We are just about 5 minutes into the flight. Less than a minute and a half from now, the side booster entry burn will begin. T plus 6 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. The side booster entry burn set to begin in just a few seconds here. And there you hear the call out. That burn will end in just about 5 seconds. You hear the call out that the FTS is safed. That is the flight termination system. Okay. T plus 7 minutes, 17 seconds into the flight. You can see side boosters making their way back down to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at landing zones 1 and 2. Landing burn starting now. Hopefully we'll be able to see those on our tracking camera. and touchdown of both of those side boosters and a pair of sonic booms as they return back to landing zones 1 and 2. And things continue to move quite well in this mission. And you may have just heard the delayed sound of the landing. The sound, of course, travels slower than the light, so it takes a second for it to reach us here at the press site at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. T plus 8 minutes, 42 seconds. And the SECO 1, the second stage engine cutoff, has happened, and that Merlin vacuum engine is going to remain off as it coasts until SES2, the second engine start at T plus 26 minutes, 25 seconds. So at this point, we have 23,000 people and dropping. Do we want to go ahead and... While you're doing that, what's up? As we are in a coast of the upper stage, want to talk about what the timeline looks at this point as we are T plus 11 minutes, 4 seconds into this mission. At T plus 26 minutes, 25 seconds, we'll see the beginning of the second burn for the upper stage Merlin vacuum engine, SES2. That burn will last just a little over a minute and some change. Second stage engine cutoff will happen at T plus 27 minutes and 59 seconds. And then it will coast for quite some time until the third burn. That comes at T plus 3 hours, 22 minutes and 1 second. The engine will fire for less than 30 seconds, about 25, when SECO 3 will occur. Followed by what Hughes has been waiting all week for, and those of us here on the Space Coast and around the world as well that have been tracking this mission. At T plus 3 hours, 28 minutes, 39 seconds, the Jupiter 3 / EchoStar 24 satellite will deploy. And right now you can see what the track looks like as the second stage cruises over the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, flying away in an easterly fashion from Florida, heading toward the continent of Africa. Really appreciate all of you that have been joining us throughout the duration of this coverage. Of course, was paying attention to what was going on with the mission, but want to shout out some of the activity in the chat. Alexis Sabati, really appreciate the $60 super chat, says, "Let's go Falcon Heavy," and gives us a thanks for the coverage. We appreciate you being here, Alexis. And everyone else who has joined us throughout tonight. There's an Outdoor One with a $10 super chat. Thank you for that. We always watch SpaceX, and suppose that's good because SpaceX seems to always be doing something, whether it be here in Florida or over at Vandenberg Space Force Space, where they have another pad there for their Falcon 9. And we'll also have the opportunity to launch the Falcon Heavy from the West Coast as well. Bill Grogan also with a $20 super chat donation. Thank you so much for that. SG with a really cute pear thank you emoji and a $10 super chat donation. Thank you so much for that, as well as ME or me. Appreciate all of you that have been joining us tonight as SpaceX continues on with the mission, as we are just about 14 minutes into the Hughes Jupiter 3 mission, the 7th launch of the Falcon Heavy. And of course, now that the pad has been freed up at Launch Complex 39A, NASA, of course, is still in the midst of preparing for the Crew 7 mission. We'll have a lot of coverage on that heading into that. Taking a look there at the pad, now empty of a Falcon Heavy rocket, launched just 14.5 minutes ago. Spectacular liftoff, and things are going nominally with the mission so far. You see just to the left of the angled transporter erector, that is the crew and cargo tower, where the 3 astronauts and the cosmonaut will ascend and get inside their Crew Dragon spacecraft in mid-August before they take off to have a long-duration mission at the International Space Station. The Crew 6 members will have a brief handover period where their new members of the International Space Station family will join them, have a little bit of crossover, and then the Crew 6 team will depart on their Crew Dragon and return and splash down off the coast of Florida. T plus 15 minutes, 30 seconds. T plus 16 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. We are now less than 10 minutes away from the start of the second stage engine burn. The second stage engine burn, SES2. Carlos with a $2 super chat. We appreciate you. Well, we appreciate you and everyone who has been joining us tonight. All those who have been able to make a super chat donation and help with our coverage of the space program. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot to keep an eye on and bring to you. We love doing what we do, and we really appreciate the support, all the likes, the sharing of the stream, the super chats, and the memberships help us to accomplish those goals. So we appreciate you, Carlos. As well as John Washburn with a $20 super chat. Really appreciate you making a donation at that level, John. Hope you've enjoyed the coverage tonight. approaching T plus 19 minutes and counting in this mission. I want to give a thank you to Evan Spector for your $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Evan, for joining us and for your contribution to our coverage. Had a question in the chat. I lost who asked it. Apologies for that. Cosmonaut is what Russia calls their astronauts. Just in short. Similarly, China calls its crew members that head up to its space station taikonauts. So a couple different programs with a couple different names for the folks that go to space on their behalf. We have someone who was watching from Florida's West Coast, Robert Fulmer. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you were able to see it from Estero. Be curious what the visibility was like over there. And seeing a lot of folks in the chat as we are T plus 21 minutes, 5 seconds and counting up. Just a few minutes away from the reignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Sounds like a good number of folks that are in the Central Florida area. Some over a little bit farther away on the West Coast may have been able to see it as well, which is fabulous. Marie Hill Music says, we saw it from the beach in Pinellas County, due west from the Cape. Yeah, I've got some friends over there, so great that you could see it. Thank you so much, Astro Joe, for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that. It's very generous of you. Of course, our members get access to member-only videos as well as discounts in our merch shop. And it looks like your little icon there is a little hard to see. It's a little small, but it appears to be the patch for the Polaris Dawn mission, if I'm not mistaken. That will also use Pad 39A, set for a little bit later this year. I believe the 4-member crew was actually in an air show this past week, doing some flying before they fly in their Crew Dragon later on this year. No date just yet on exactly when the Polaris Dawn mission will launch. Folks at the program say it'll happen no earlier than the 4th quarter of this year. So, of course, we're going to keep a close eye on that. One of the notable points of that mission is they plan to perform the first commercial spacewalk. They're not going to be docking with the International Space Station, but will be performing an EVA from the Crew Dragon. So certainly a notable sight when that mission launches, and something that we will definitely have coverage on as it approaches. Tyler Hook sending in a $5 super chat, saying hello from Clinton, Iowa. Excellent. Hope all is well over there. Really appreciate you being with us for the coverage tonight. As we are now T plus 24 minutes, 47 seconds.
Acquisition of signal Gabon.
Here you hear the call out for signal acquisition as we are less than 2 minutes from SES-2. DM with a $2 super chat, thanking us for the coverage, and we want to thank you and everyone else who has been here with us tonight. And being that there was the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time, this is technically a double launch day for SpaceX, so another continuation as they have launched their 51st mission between Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets, and Emmy gifting 50 Spaceflight Now memberships. That is extremely generous. Really appreciate you for that. And want to welcome all of our new members that were gifted those memberships by Emmy. Thank you so much for the contribution. That is really quite generous. It goes a long way towards helping our coverage of the space program. Lots happening here. T plus 26 minutes, 27 seconds, and SES-2 should have begun. Hear that call out momentarily. That burn will last just about a minute and a half till T plus 27 minutes, 59 seconds. And there you have the visual of SES-2 underway now. T plus 27 minutes, 30 seconds. That engine burn will continue on for about 20 more seconds. And that engine will shut off and remain off for nearly 3 hours. SES-3 doesn't occur until 3 hours, 22 minutes, and 1 second into this mission. So quite a long coast phase coming up shortly. We should see that engine shut off momentarily, as long as they continue to have good signal. And unfortunately, loss of signal there, but SES or SECO 2 should have occurred. Just unfortunately don't have live pictures of it. But now begins the long coast phase for SpaceX's Falcon Heavy upper stage. As we'd say, miles to go until we sleep That is true both for the upper stage of this rocket as well as for us. So we'll continue to stay up and keep an eye on this coast stage until it's ready to deploy the Jupiter 3 satellite.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And we hear the call out for a nominal orbit insertion. And seeing as the upper stage has about a 3-hour coast phase at this point, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our live coverage on this channel. But we'll switch over to our Launchpad live stream to continue the feed of the trajectory of the second stage, and we'll continue to track this mission. We'll bring you the very latest on our social feeds. Spaceflight Now is on Twitter as well as Threads. And we'll have updates on this mission leading up to and through satellite deployment. But before we go, want to go ahead and take one last look at the chat. See Michelle Sullivan, the $10 contribution to our coverage. Thanking for that and the information. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle, and for your super chat contribution, as well as that of Nadine Lamakin. Apologies if I mispronounce your last name, Nadine, but thank you so much for the $20 super chat. And for all of you who have been here with us throughout the duration of the coverage. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, just see Shirley Benoit with a $2 super chat with a lot of heart emojis and some rockets. The perfect number, 3 little rocket emojis for the 3 boosters of this Falcon Heavy
Acquisition of
rocket.
signal heart of Beachstock.
And with that, we want to thank you again so much for being here with us tonight. And before we go, we want to leave you with one last image from one of our fantastic photographers who shoots these beautiful rocket launches for us from Florida Space Coast. This is photographer Michael Kane. And you have just a beautiful compilation shot here of all the major events that we could see here from Florida Space Coast. From the launch, BECO, you see the entry burn there at the top of your screen, and then the landing burn streak as those boosters return to landing zones 1 and 2. Just a fantastic shot from Michael, and we always appreciate the photos that he takes for us and we're able to share with our viewers here and around the world. Helps us tell the story both live as it's happening, but it's always wonderful to see how it looks, just this snapshot in time for SpaceX's 51st mission of either a Falcon Heavy or a Falcon 9 rocket. Lots on tap for them for the rest of this year, as well as many other launch companies around the world. In fact, Rocket Lab is getting ready to launch its 40th Electron rocket from New Zealand. That's coming up this Sunday. Taking a look at views of the Jupiter 3 satellite and the Merlin vacuum engine, which is chilling as it's remaining in a coast phase for the next 3 hours, and just a little under 3 hours now. Saw a couple other super chats that popped in here, so want to go ahead and make note of those before we wrap up the coverage tonight. Incon Truth with a $2 super chat, and Joe Limber with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Joe says, great coverage. Saw the Falcon 9 from the Cape this morning. First ever. Then was able to find tonight's launch from down in the Keys. That is, sounds like a pretty good day. Hope you were able to get some sleep in between a midnight launch and the one we had tonight. But yes, definitely exciting to get a double header while you're in Florida. And, fortunately, the rate of launches makes it so if you do end up spending some time in Central Florida, and especially on the East Coast, odds are if you're here for long enough, you yourself may just be able to catch a launch. Lots happening between SpaceX, ULA, and upcoming companies. Relativity Space will be back with its Terranar rocket in the coming years, as well as Blue Origin with its New Glenn rocket, and some smaller launch companies that are going to be taking over some pads in the coming years. So lots to talk about. And of course, over at Launch Complex 39B, the Artemis 2 mission, which is set to launch no earlier than late next year, the end of 2024. The 4 astronauts for that mission have been busy training, and we will continue to bring you coverage as that mission progresses. But for now, we're going to wind down this coverage tonight. Thank you again so much for being with us for our live coverage of the Falcon Heavy rocket, sending the Jupiter 3 satellite to geosynchronous orbit. That'll do it for us tonight. For Stephen Young, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to continue following us, again, we'll have updates on our social media, both on Threads and Twitter, and we'll continue with live pictures over on the Launchpad live stream. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.